I have a question about counsel now.
Okay.
And this is a question which he very ably answers in the book. If the gift of counsel carries with it a certainty that inspiration is from the Holy Spirit, why would we still need to ask direction from other human beings?
I'm trying to remember. What does John say about, what is his specific response? And I'm trying to remember what he said.
Sure.
Because you said he answers it very,
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll just look at my notes here then.
please.
He says that counsel is a gift of a mystical and effective character arising from loving knowledge, but it can involve discourse, reasoning, and consultation of others, all guided by the Holy Spirit. He gives the example of Cornelius, who received an apparition from an angel who told him to seek the counsel of St. Peter. And I'll quote a couple of passages from John here. Ordinarily, the illumination of God is given with concomitant dependence upon others, inferiors being enlightened by superiors, and elsewhere he says, the counsel of God is especially a counsel of humility and examination, unquote, although in extraordinary cases it may proceed without consultation, in which case caution and discernment of spirits would still be necessary. And then he gives us sort of a practical point here also. He says that people publicly claiming to speak from the Spirit of God should not be easily believed without examination by wise and spiritual men.
Yeah, there
But
we go.
in private and particular counsel, one can follow the guidance of what he calls a man of approved life without needing proof of miracles or examination by the authorities, because he says, well, in fact, we see that many saints and prophets gave counsel from the Spirit without the proofs from miracles or being examined by superiors before people followed that counsel. So I just think that's very interesting. It's a very practical discussion, because you might encounter people saying, I'm guided by the Holy Spirit, therefore why would I consult, either the magisterium of the church, or even maybe on a lesser level, say just a spiritual director or my pastor, or anybody who might have any kind of like countervailing considerations to point out.
Absolutely. It's very profound. Yeah, this is where the gifts, it's interesting. We notice that particularly with the gift of counsel, although it occurs in a person having that gift, that habit, that habitus, it doesn't isolate you. This is the beautiful thing. God draws all things to himself. And so even within the church, within the community, the Christian community, one receives this instinctus, this activation of the gift of counsel. And that doesn't place him at a distance from others, disciples and followers of Christ, who maybe are not experiencing the same activation or instinctus. But the gift provides for the possibility for discourse and discussion and understanding and union too. So in other words, the gifts of the Holy Spirit do not isolate or separate us from the church or from the Christian faithful. And so that John is articulating how that integration of one having the gift with others who maybe don't have the gift activated at that moment, how that can occur. Because here's the thing, when we think of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, maybe I should have said this at the beginning. These are not what are called charismatic or gratuitous graces. A charismatic or a gratuitous grace like miracle working or healing, those gifts are gifts from God, but they're ordered for the salvation and sanctification of others. In other words, it's possible to be in mortal sin and to be able to be a healer. But what the gifts of the Holy Spirit are doing is they are for our salvation as individuals and also for the salvation of others. They're both. Mm-hmm. And so it's impossible then, if that's truly the dynamic, it's good for me as recipient and the activation of them, but it's also a good that is for others. It's impossible ever with those gifts to brightly understood and truly present, activated, to ever end up in like a guru situation. Today, we're very concerned about kind of the dialectical materialistic power dynamics. Oh, well, these gifts could be activated such that now a person, a man or a woman, will begin to exercise dominion upon others. That is unintelligible within the dynamic of what the gifts actually do. There is no domination. It's only salvific ordering within the individual in whom they're activated, and then the confirmation and engagement with the community. So this is the opposite, basically, of Marxism.
Interesting. Yeah. As a side note, it struck me before that Catholicism is really the only it's been commented Catholicism is a religion that is the same religion for, the elites and the common people, whether that be intellectual elites, and the masses. They all have devotion to the saints, these things that people from outside might look at as, the devotion to the saints is for superstitious, pious old ladies. Well, no, the great intellectuals of the church had just as much devotion to the saints, for example, but also between mysticism and authority, because granted, my knowledge of other religions is a bit, superficial, but it seems, though, from learning a bit about, for example, the history of Sufism within Islam, the Sufis were the ones who said, well, we have this loving union with God, and therefore those who have achieved this no longer need the law of the Quran, and we no longer need the text. And you can certainly understand how someone who did have some kind of genuine mystical gift outside the church might say something like that if they were stuck in a religion like Islam, But within the Catholic Church, that there's much more of a symbiotic and healthy and regulating relationship, regulating on one side perhaps, and like vivifying on the other side, between sort of like the authority and the texts and the laws and the individual mystics and the sort of authenticating of mystical experience. I don't know that you really see that kind of relationship where the two where a mystical experience doesn't necessarily sort of like exceed the bounds of the religion in any other religion,
Yes, and indeed, in our ranks, at least, if anyone starts claiming in the church that whether they're a cleric or a layperson of standing and significance, that I have received a revelation or an instinctus from God that exempts me from the order that he's laid out, we know that that's proof positive, number one, that this person is not to be trusted. Right. It's very interesting. Right. You never graduate from the order of things that God's established. That's a very interesting point.